What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on? The Philadelphia Eagles win in Brazil, take down the Packers, 34-29. Is that the final score? 34-29. What a game. I mean, that thing, I had about 7 different takes I had to erase. I had a tweet in the hopper about Jordan Love early on in the game. I'm glad I didn't fire that bad boy off. But luckily, it looks like Jordan Love has avoided serious injury. But not a great game for Jordan Love. Jalen Hurts all over the map, but came through in a couple big spots. Made some big plays, obviously, with his arms and legs. Saquon Barkley, as John Morrow once famously said on a little show they call Hard Knocks, I don't know if I could sleep watching him in Philadelphia. I'm sure he's going to lose a little sleep tonight as Saquon Barkley gets 3 touchdowns. Obviously, I think the defense on both these two teams, I mean, these are... The Packers were a top 5 team for me. I might have to change that after watching the defense tonight. I think the Eagles defense clearly has some issues, but both these teams have a lot of offensive firepower. They just need their quarterbacks to play better. Eagles 1-0, Packers 0-1, and I was thinking watching this, we'll dive into it, but just a lot going on. A couple other things I want to hit because last night after we recorded a reaction, a lot of comments were coming from the Ravens, and people were ripping them. Have some thoughts there, and then we'll just hit a couple other things. A little weekend 6-pack. We'll fly around the league getting ready for Sunday, which the NFL's back in full swing, baby. So it was an enjoyable game to watch on a Friday night when, unless you have kids playing high school football, it was much better than BYU, SMU. I would imagine. Didn't watch a snap of that game. So we will dive in to this game right off the top for sure. But before we do that, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast. Here's the thing. Do you want to go to a game? Do you want to go to an event, a concert, a comedy show, get a little laugh in, have some smiles, enjoy the night? Well, you can do it on us because Game Time has you covered. Any event, pro or college, obviously football season now is in full swing. Any concert, get out, have a few pops, take some buddies, go enjoy yourself, and do it on us. Because right now, my friends at Game Time have a great deal going for you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Obviously, many of you, most of our listeners are in America, though we do have an international audience. We've even had people from Brazil hit me up. I am okay with the expansion of the league and going international with these games. I do think when you do it and you go to Brazil, let's face it, that field tonight was a disaster. It looked like these guys were on ice on both teams. And how many plays, both these two teams possess, one, they're cash cows for the league. Green Bay is one of the biggest brands. Obviously, so is Philadelphia. They're consistent stalwarts in the playoffs where the league makes a lot of their money. It's why these rights holders pay so much because of the ratings, not just in the regular season, but how gigantic these playoff games are. And there are a lot of really important people on every NFL team, but specifically ones that are going to win double-digit games and be playing in January. And listen, as of recording this immediately right after the game, I don't know Jordan Love's status based on just a guy that's been watching sports for 35 years. Looked like he just rolled an ankle, thank God, because whenever anyone's laying there. And listen, that could happen on any field. He got twisted by a couple defensive linemen. But they got very lucky that no one tore an Achilles or tore an ACL slipping and sliding on that field. I mean, I can't imagine early on in that game when guys were sliding, Gutekunst and Howie are like, oh my God. And I know Blackledge said that when he went to practice yesterday, the field was in pretty good shape. Well, I don't know what happened, whether it's the dew at night I don't know if they're close to the ocean or not. Not a geography major here, in terms of where the city is relative in the area, but that was bad. And that was in Rogers sitting there with the ambassador of America from the for Brazil. I just thought it was rough. It really was. I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy. I'm glad football's back. But, and listen, some of our fields in America historically have been hit or miss at times. I remember when the 49ers built their stadium, their field conditions were a joke. But that's what I thought tonight. And when you're going to go international, and especially to a place that you are not consistently going, and for that to happen, I mean, can you imagine if an A.J. Brown, a Saquon Barkley, one of the star players on the Green Bay, Josh Jacobs, had slipped in the open field by themselves in a non-contact injury and ripped their knee up? And I was kind of holding my breath all night as guys were slipping and sliding. Even Saquon, after he scored a touchdown, ran toward the back of the end zone to kind of go around before Lane Johnson greeted him. And he almost did a little slip and he kind of caught himself. So it was a rough night for the field. The officials these last two nights are throwing flags left and right. But I want to get to the game. And a little good, bad, and ugly with both teams. Obviously, the best is winning. That's the whole point of the sport. So regardless how good, how bad, how ugly, if you win a game, especially when your plane flight is 8 hours to the destination, you feel pretty good about yourself. Week one's a big deal. You've had 9 months, especially a team like the Eagles. They don't play any of their starters. And Jalen Hurts opened the game with just a horrendous pick down the middle of the field into like double coverage that was an easy interception. Toward the end of the game, he threw one of the worst interceptions you can possibly throw. I don't pretend to be Bill Walsh or Kyle Shanahan here, but it's a basic rule in football when it comes to quarterback play, especially in the red zone. Do not throw across your body. And he did, and it got picked. And at the time, it was 31-26. So if they had just kicked a field goal, it would have been 34-26. And the play before, he easily could have thrown a pick six. Now, the good with Jalen is when he does get into a rhythm, he's a beautiful deep ball thrower. He has good touch on balls that kind of loop in the air. I would not say that he has a super strong arm in terms of just throwing bullets, but anytime you get a deeper breaking route and he can set his feet, he's pretty accurate. And he did that consistently all night to A.J. Brown, hit Goddard a couple times, Devontae Smith. This is why I like the Eagles, even if you have some question marks with them. Their talent on offense is just kind of stupid. Saquon went 24 for 109 and 3 touchdowns tonight. A.J. Brown had 5 for 119. Devontae Smith had 7 for 84. And Goddard had 4 catches. Like, all those guys make big-time coin, including the quarterback and many guys on the offensive line. So their offensive skill guys, even when he's throwing picks, are so explosive that they're going to be able to score 25 to 30 points pretty easily. We talked about it last night with Kansas City. Last year, and everyone's been saying this, if you're going to get him, you should have got him last year because it was hard for them to score points. Well, it's not going to be hard for them to score points. But their offensive weaponry, obviously Patrick Mahomes is dramatically better than Jalen. But in terms of the skill around him, that's about as good as you get. I mean, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, you could argue, are one of the better 1-2 combinations. And we talked about this in the offseason when we were watching Hard Knocks. I understand the philosophical belief of we don't pay older running backs. It's very, very risky. I totally get it. But when John Mara said, I don't know if I can sleep at night if he goes to the Eagles, everyone's like, that's how a fan talks. Well, yeah, kind of. But he also knows that's our best player, and that's the best organization in our division. So if a shitty team is willing to overpay your running back, yeah, maybe you should question yourself. Like, is this, like, let him go. I totally understand it. I guess you don't need to question yourself. But the Eagles, who are about as well run as any team in the league when it comes to picking and signing players, are very, very interested because of, as we've talked about, in both the running backs on, Jacobs included, they are now a discount, right? Brandon Ayuk cost $30 million a year. You had to give him $75 million guaranteed. Actually, I think it was 76. Saquon Barkley's total of his contract, guaranteed and non-guaranteed money, was $37 million over 3 years. So it's now a discount, right? Buy low, sell high. Well, now on running backs who are really, really good, as is Saquon, you saw tonight, like very, very explosive. And it's not like he's just a speed back. He is a physical player. He obviously can catch the ball. He had a receiving touchdown. He's a dynamic player, and it completely changes their offense. Now, the thing with Jalen is he's an interesting player because obviously he's talented and he's going to put up big numbers, but he's not near the top dogs. And I think when you look back 2 years ago with Shane Steichen, a little bit of an outlier. As you saw tonight, like he puts the ball in harm's way. I think it's fair to question his decision making. I would not put him near the top as a great decision maker. The first interception, you could go, well, didn't play in the preseason, a little rusty. Let's even chalk that one up. But down the stretch of the game, when you have a lead, he easily could have thrown. Now, the second one, if he would have thrown the pick six, the next play would not have happened, obviously. But then later on the next drive, he almost threw another pick to Jair Alexander, where he was right in front of A.J. Brown. And I think sometimes when he's flustered, he just makes poor decisions. Luckily, they're so explosive and they're scoring so many points that they can overcome it. And the Packers defense, who we'll get into in a minute, is obviously not great. But I think Jalen is just, obviously his good is really good. And his bad is really bad. Like you saw tonight, some MVP, I don't even know MVP, like Pro Bowl level plays. And you saw like Daniel Jones level plays. And it's going to be on Kellen Moore and it's going to be on the coaching staff to try to corral that. But I do think it's going to be kind of difficult. So when I look at the Eagles, like I didn't pick them to win the division. I picked the Cowboys. And I guess we'll see Dak play on Sunday. But like I think Dak, I am more confident in on the long haul of his play. Jalen is a little bit more of a roller coaster. And you saw tonight the full package. You saw the good, bad, and the ugly. Series to series. And I think one thing is Jalen can't play like he's Peyton Manning. That's not his style. And I think deep down he wants to I just want to be a pocket quarterback. He's not as fast, obviously, as Lamar. But what makes Lamar a top 5 quarterback is not his throwing. He's a fine thrower. But when he has to win within the pocket, that's not his thing. It's that he's a dominant dual threat quarterback. And I think ever since 2 years ago, toward the end of the season, Jalen, the year that he was competing to win the MVP and then had the really good Super Bowl, he was a real dual threat player. And if you watched him at Oklahoma, when he ran, he'd like turn into a running back. He's not super fast, but he's just a super instinctive runner. And you saw tonight, he's really powerful. But I don't think he really wants to do it anymore. He did it a couple times at the end of the game, but throughout the course of the game, it feels like those days are kind of over. Like deep down, Jalen, and this happened to Russell, like I want to prove I can be a pocket quarterback. And I just don't think that's the way to play him. I really don't. Now, if you scheme the perfect play because of their talent, it's going to work. But over the course of a game, things are going to break down. He kind of holds the ball a little bit long. He can keep plays alive because he's mobile. But sometimes when he does that, he gets into just awful situations. So, I'm not saying you're down on Jalen Hurts if you're an Eagle fan or if you're Howie. I'm not saying you're high on him. You're just kind of like, whoa, this is going to be a roller coaster ride. Luckily, our team's pretty stacked. Now, we talked about it coming into this game defensively, is their defensive line needed to dominate. Well, as this game went on, they've invested 2 real high picks into Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. 2 blue chippers. I mean, Jalen, if it wasn't for all the off the field question marks, would have been a lock number 1 overall pick non-quarterback. And I'd have to think who was in his draft, but he would have been the first quarterback off the board. But he fell to 9th for a reason. And you watch him tonight, you're like, where is he? Why isn't he dominating? Jordan Davis, the knock on him last year was weight. And they're getting gashed tonight by Josh Jacobs. Even the backup was averaging over 10 yards a carry. The Packers ran for 163 yards. Now, 33 of those were on a Jaden Reed end around, but still, I mean, I think part of what it made the Eagles really good a couple years ago was their defensive line dominated. Where's the edge pressure? I mean, Brandon Graham's older now. They paid Huff a lot of money, who the question mark with him was being an all around player. How is he against the run? Didn't really feel his presence. And the linebacker play is just going to be a question. Now, they signed Devin White, who was supposed to be a plug and play player. He didn't play tonight. So maybe he will help. But Michael Lombardi's talked about this for a while. And listen, I agree. When your linebackers don't play super fast, sometimes your defense can feel a little slow. And against the run, their defense felt a little slow. Now, the young guy they drafted, Mitchell from Toledo, looks like a really good player. But the rest of their DBs, I mean, it's going to be a challenge. If their defensive line does not perform at a much higher rate than this, their offense is going to have to score a lot of points because that was concerning. Listen, it's the first week, and the Packers have a lot of juice. But man, I just, when you draft guys really high on your front four, by year 2, year 3, you expect them to be serious impact players throughout the game. And I just didn't feel their presence. So Jalen roller coaster. Good thing for Sirianni. He didn't really factor in good or bad to this game. I don't blame him for those Jalen decisions. Kellen does a good job scheming guys open, but man, you just can't make some of those decisions. And you as a coach, like once the ball snapped and a guy's scrambling to his right, like you've drilled it in a million times. You don't think Saban's told him that? Lincoln Riley's told him that? I think his dad was his high school coach. Like he's heard it for a long period of time. You can't make that play, especially this many years into your career, regardless how much you make. I mean, that's football 101. But even with all these question marks, with his turnovers, I think the tush push clearly is not the same. Definitely not the same. And you lose one of, if not the greatest center of all time, definitely the best center of his generation, feels different. Obviously, the snap at the end of the game, they're not on the same page. They had a fumbled snap early in the game where Jalen wasn't paying attention. Clearly, it wasn't supposed to be snapped then. That's just something to keep an eye on because I would say their cohesion, center to quarterback, was as good as it got. It was like the Stephen Clay version of quarterback center exchange. And now that's gone. And I think we underestimate that because it's hard to quantify, right? It's easy to quantify losing a running back, a tight end, a wide receiver, but like what happens when you lose the greatest center in the history of the franchise, who was a huge part of one of the most unique plays we've ever seen? And we felt it tonight. It's simply not the same. But with all that being said, you'll take a win no matter how many question marks and crazy things happen throughout the game. The Packers. I'm as high on Jordan Love as anyone. I picked them to compete for the NFC because I'm buying stock in this guy. And maybe by the time you're listening to this, he said after the game, assuming his ankle's all right, that his calf was giving him a lot of trouble and he wasn't able to plant and throw and drive the ball. But I would say for like half his throws, especially in the second half, it felt like he was watching an Aaron Rodgers in the prime of his career teach tape, which no one should do because no one can really do that, throwing balls off the back of his feet all over the place. He was extremely erratic. I thought for stretches in the third quarter, he was awful, which is concerning. One, just the health of the player, but like we can't have this loosey-goosey just kind of flinging it all over the place with our feet not being set. You have a good arm, but it's one thing to throw the ball off your back feet because you're getting pressure. It's another thing with a clean pocket and just being too cool for school. Like, that's why the ball is not going to go where it's supposed to go. And I thought Jordan Love, the second half of the game, now maybe it was his calf cramping up. Maybe it was just, who knows? I'm not a doctor. I haven't seen the press conference yet, but that was bad. It was just not good. And they were playing winning football because they were running the ball down the Eagles' throats. And their wide receivers, even slipping and sliding all over the field, were getting open. Those young wide receivers, Reed, Wicks, Watson, that's an encouraging group. Tucker Kraft, it's hard not to like their group of young skill guys. But Jordan Love, you get paid, a lot of pressure on you. Like, we still need you to just have some basic footwork here. Obviously, he knows it, but he's just kind of like too cool for school. And the balls, like if he was a baseball pitcher, you would have yanked him in the fourth or the fifth inning. Obviously, I'm not saying you would have pulled him out of the game, but like balls are flying all over the map. And I think both these running backs, back to the market, both these teams bought low on running backs relative to all these other positions, and those two guys are studs. Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley, I mean, when they're humming, they're top five running backs. Obviously, Saquon's probably a top two or three. I think Josh Jacobs has said for years he might even be more complete than Saquon. He's not as fast, but he is a very, very good player. And when your quarterback in both these two teams, just erratic quarterback play. Like the one thing on Thursday night, Lamar was a little up and down, but he could always make up for it when he's like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna run. I'm gonna run for 30 yards and look like Barry Sanders or Walter Payton." Now that's not the way he played. I was texting with a buddy tonight in the league. He's like, "Listen, he is tough to play, but that is not a sustainable way to play." But in an individual game situation, sometimes you got to do it. Jordan Love, by the end of the game, and might have been his calf, wasn't even that mobile. But even when he stayed in the pocket, he wasn't very accurate. So it was just, if you're a Packer fan, it's not total freak out time by any means, but it was not a very good game. That looked much more like over the course of the game, like the first half of last year than it did the second half of last year when he became a $150 million player. And this is what I always say, why it's so hard to become a star. Because becoming a star is not doing something for a year. And even though I projected him to keep being good, I bought into it. How could you not? But it's hard to do it year after year. So there's going to be pressure on him, one, just to get healthy and just play more consistent. Because with that many skill guys, there aren't excuses. And here's the other thing. Like, division's tough, man. So this was a road game in Brazil, not the end of the world by any means, but I think individually, when you look at him, makes you scratch your head a little bit. And then last but not least, I talked about it coming into this game on Thursday's podcast. The defense, the defense, the defense. And you hire Jeff Hafley, who, like, listen, with Vic Fangio, like, he has a long resume of doing this. And they're paying him $5 million for a reason. They feel very confident he knows what he's doing. Now, whether that actually comes to fruition over the course of the season, only time will tell. But Jeff Hafley has been a defensive coordinator in the NFL 0 years of his career. He's been a defensive coordinator at a Power 5 college 1 year of his career, and I'm pretty sure he's the co-defensive coordinator. Now, there is a chance, like, they've gone through a lot of defensive coordinators over the Rodgers and Love era now, and most of their defenses have looked pretty similar. Missed tackles, DBs running behind guys, and getting gashed in the run game. So there is a chance it's the players. They've invested a lot of money. Obviously, Kenny Clark's a really good player, and so is Rashawn Gary. But it feels like the defense reminded me a lot of the previous couple years when the Green Bay Packer fans were like, "Get this Joe Barry guy off my sideline," which I understand. As a fan, when you watch an offense or defense suck, you want that coordinator gone. No different than a player. Like, this guy can't play. Let's draft another guy. There is no guarantee that the guy you draft is going to be any better. And Jeff Hafley, the jury's still out, because tonight they were getting shredded. And I don't give him that much credit for some of the interceptions. Jalen Hurts is throwing it right to you, right? Just awful decision making. So I think if you're a Packer fan, LaFleur's proven, Jordan Love's proven that they can mentally handle some bumps in the road. They did it last year. I would feel pretty good about over the course of the year, as long as Love is healthy, that our offense will be better. And they scored 29 points tonight and actually had a couple awful red zone trips. I mean, they easily could have scored 40 if they were better in the red zone. But the defense, man, I mean, if you're an Eagle fan, it's like we got some big ass dudes up front. Let's figure something fucking out here. You're the Packers. You're like, can any of our guys play in our back seven? Quay Walker made a couple plays, but like, are our guys good enough? And does our coordinator know what he's doing? Our division's really hard. The expectations for this team are high. The hype on this guy is high because we stole him. He was a head coach in college and he came here. It's like, this guy's going to save us. And then the first night, Eagles run for 144 yards, throw for 280, and you're not feeling great. You're really not. So this is what the cool part about the last two nights. You're watching four teams that should be locked playoff teams with the talent they have. But beside the Chiefs, Ravens got issues. Eagles defense has some question marks. Obviously, Jalen. And the Packers now, the defense looks kind of the same. Like it looks exactly the same. And I think that is going to be the pressure and the test put on this defensive coordinator. Like, can he fix it? Because we've seen this before. Well, this next guy's going to fix it. And then he can't. So to me, for the Packers, who I thought were a Super Bowl contender, no chance. Like if you're going to play defense even in this world, it's not possible. And to me, on the Eagles to be a Super Bowl contender, obviously Jalen cannot turn the ball over in these big spots. But it's like, is their linebacker play good enough? And beside the rookie DB, can they cover well enough? Because it is difficult in this modern day NFL. Like the huge advantage the Chiefs have is they're great cover team. They have DBs 4 days. What's a passing league? So it's like perfectly made. And they have the greatest quarterback. So you're like, well, they got the greatest quarterback and they got a great pass defense. It's like kind of works. I mean, that's kind of the formula in 2024. In 1996, you better be able to run the ball and you better be able to stop the run. I'm watching the Packers tonight. Now, and listen, it's a tough matchup. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Those two guys are making a lot of money. But they had no shot. I mean, it should have been worse. So, little overreaction. Week 1, big game. But that's part of the deal. Especially, like, we're not watching the Giants and Panthers here. These are two teams that have, like, NFC Championship, Super Bowl aspirations. And these are their players, right? It's not like reinforcements ain't coming. Like Deion Sanders or Warren Sapp, or like these players ain't walking through the door in the middle of the season. That's not the way it works. So you either coach these guys up or you have this deficiency that you try to overcome all season long. NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Fans have spoken. We want touchdowns. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like picking a player to score a touchdown. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. It's code JOHN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. And get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Okay, I wanted to dive in something that I saw today that I didn't get to notice because when we go and record right after the game, it's not like we sit and wait for the press conferences and everything to come out to then dissect. I mean, this is kind of the game ends and the record button, and I'm firing off takes and thoughts on the game within, I would say, no more than 5 to 7 minutes. So it's pretty rapid fire. And then when I'm laying in bed, scrolling around, you see all these comments from the Ravens, and everyone's just crushing them, essentially calling them delusional. And I want to defend the Ravens for a little bit because I think anyone can relate to this. When you are chasing someone, and I would say most of us in our different lines of work are always chasing someone or something. There's always people ahead of you, more than likely, in an industry. If you run a company, companies doing better than you. If it's individual positions, people you aspire to be. And the only way to get there, obviously, you got to work hard. You got to produce. I do believe you got to be a little delusional. I think of most of us, and I throw myself in there, if I just listed on a weekly basis my career aspirations, my financial aspirations, you would probably think I was a delusional lunatic. And I would imagine if I put a mic in front of your mouth and asked for the same, especially someone very competitive, someone very aspirational, someone that wants to achieve a lot, you might sound crazy too to a lot of people. So when the Ravens lose and Lamar says they're not my kryptonite, I believe we scored a touchdown, Isaiah Likely, if that's their best shot, Good luck to them in the future, meaning we'll see in the playoffs again. It's easy for everyone to take a giant dump on everything they're saying, but it doesn't bother me as much. I don't like delusion when you have no success and you have no chance of success in the near future. So when bad teams talk craziness as the season goes on, it's like you guys are out in the wilderness. But the Ravens are good. And over the Lamar era, they've been really good. The problem for them has been these big games, obviously the Chiefs and just other playoff games. But the only way that they're ever going to get over the hump from a mental standpoint is believe they can win. And before you can actually do something, you have to kind of believe it. Now, I don't think this version of Lamar can beat the Chiefs. And I do believe they're his kryptonite. Why? Because he can't throw on them. There was a period during the game last night, Collinsworth mentioned this, his average throw length was like 1 yard past the line of scrimmage. It ain't going to work. You have to hit these big plays or just bigger chunk plays. And they can't just be these freak lucky, you hit Isaiah Likely, which is a good pass and a good play, but then he does the rest. Like part of what makes the Chiefs and gives their advantage over good teams is they can sustain a drive at any moment throwing the ball. And Lamar simply, against the best, cannot. He makes up for it and keeps you in games like last night with his exceptional athleticism and running ability. It's like he turns into Barry Sanders. It's remarkable to watch. And I saw a lot of people today nitpicking if he takes too many hits. And over the course of time, I agree, but it doesn't feel like he gets hit hard that many times. I know he's part of collisions, but I would tend to agree you can't sustain running around getting hit, but you have to be delusional. You really do. And I think their franchise, the only way to get past the big dogs, specifically the Chiefs, is they're going to have this, only they're going to believe. Because if they play again in January, one, they're going to be the underdog. And two, nobody, and I mean nobody, is going to pick them to win or believe they can win outside of that Ravens locker room. And I would imagine there will even be some people inside the Ravens like, can we really do this? But if their best players aren't delusional about their opportunity to figure this thing out, they got no fucking chance. Right? Just like if you don't believe in yourself, good luck in life. Right? Because trust me, a lot of people not only don't care, they're not thinking about you or believing in you. So you have to have the most belief in your success. I believe that big time. And listen, are there comments to the casual person kind of crazy given what we've witnessed these last two games? Of course they are. But like this team's aspirations as a franchise, and they're one of the more clearly higher level franchises in the league. Lamar has flaws, but he's still a better player than like 98% of the league. Just happens the gap between him and Mahomes is pretty wide. And it's not really debatable at this point. Flawed player. But luckily his flaw, like the Chiefs have been the team that can really take advantage of it. Maybe they get a chance where the Chiefs get knocked out in the second round by someone else. They don't have to play them. I don't know how it plays out. I'm not betting on this Ravens team winning a Super Bowl, but if they don't believe they can, what's the point of even doing this? And I also think when you work really hard to do something and you spend months as a football player, right? You lose a devastating game in the AFC Championship game at home. And then you basically have 9 months to think about it. Every day you're training. You have OTAs and then you have training camp. All you're talking about is this game, especially the starters. Like they're not discussing the preseason. Everything from the moment the pads come on in training camp to even working on shit in the OTAs is built for that moment. And then you lose. Like it sucks. But you kind of got to warp your mind. You can't just wave the white flag. Some people might push back on that. But I wasn't like thinking these guys are insane for having what many believe to be delusional beliefs. Because I think you kind of have to ever give yourself an opportunity to achieve anything. I wanted to just hit on a bunch of stuff this weekend. I was thinking about like, you know what I haven't done in a while is like grab a 6-pack. You know, the older you get, you think back, you're like, God, simpler times. You know, you're just young, you just grab a 6-pack each with a buddy and you just cash it while you watch some TV. And I was thinking, like, let's do a little weekend six-pack of things on Sunday that I am looking forward to. And I'm looking forward to, like anyone, the best part about week one is even the bad games are very watchable because we don't really know. We have a decent idea, but some teams are going to be better than we thought. Some teams are going to be worse than we thought, but everyone starts at a 0-0 slate and anything's possible. And as I talked about with Stuckey, week one can get weird and it can get weird fast. I saw this clip go viral from inside the NFL, which Belichick has joined with Ocho, Chris Long, and I think Ryan Clark. And I want you to listen to something that Belichick said that I think, went pretty viral on the internet streets.
Whoever they played against in preseason, it wasn't the best players on the other team.
So what you're saying is, Coach, we can't plan a parade because Caleb was so accurate in the preseason.
Well, it wasn't accurate. He's 10 for 20.
Yeah, it's like you didn't watch the 20 throws. Come on. There's a reason he's excited.
It's 20 throws, Chad.
He buzzed through them. And
you got to think how good the 10 were that were completed.
Yeah.
The extended plays, the footwork.
They weren't that good. There was a couple highlight plays.
See?
They weren't that good.
First and foremost, I think everyone's like, damn, it's kind of crushing Caleb. Well, old school coaches don't get on their knees and slurp somebody that's a rookie. I don't care who it is. You have to prove it. I'm not necessarily in that camp. Like, I'm pretty hyped up. But, like, Belichick's not a big hype guy. He doesn't give a crap about that. And I've been saying this about Caleb. I think we've kind of jumped the shark a little bit. There's still a lot of unknown. Now, I get it from a Bears fan standpoint. I understand the Bears' bar at quarterback's really low. I totally understand that. But I think, I mean, Nick Wright's like picking him to compete for the Super Bowl. I see people picking this guy to be like MVP and them to win the division. It's like, guys, let's just see if like back-to-back weeks when film's out, he can beat you from the pocket. And I think Belichick is just saying like those preseason highlight tape plays that he put on tape mean nothing to me. Now, they mean something to me because he has the capability, but to be a high-level team, those plays are going to come and they go. We knew he had that capability when you watched him play at USC. For the Bears to be good, and I kind of like Titans this weekend. Not necessarily to win, but 3.5. I think everyone, like, we just need to pump the brakes on the Bears a little bit because I always say playing as a rookie quarterback and then you quadruple the hype on it is really, really hard to live up to. Like, ultimately, C.J. Stroud, who had one of the great rookie seasons we've ever seen, I think statistically the best, kind of got to fly under the radar despite being a number 2 overall pick because everyone thought his team was going to suck. And that's how most young guys get to play, right? They get to just, even Bo Nix, the over-under for the Denver Broncos, like 5.5. And most people, if you just polled like the average football fan, I think the Broncos be pretty, as the kids would say, mid, pretty average, below 500. So if he has some good games, some bad games, we'll be like, Bo Nix is really, might have something there. Or it's like if Caleb Williams is competing to be a Pro Bowler immediately, it's going to feel like a letdown in Chicago. So when Belichick's comments, everyone's like, geez, such a hater. He's just saying, like, I watched the guy throw some balls in the pocket and it didn't look great. And all he has to go on now, he's only played one, he skipped the bowl game, so he doesn't play a game till some of these preseason games, and then he's going up against vanilla defenses and backups. So I think everyone's just expecting 3 or 4 touchdowns, and that might be the case, and it'll be fun to watch, but I think it's a little more difficult than the way the discourse is gone. So if Belichick is going to like throw some zingers and talk a little shit, I'm all in. eBay Motors is here for the ride. The first car I ever got, I was 16 years old, and my grandpa gave me a ride. And like any young lad who got a car that, let's face it, would not have been my first choice, I had to touch it up a little bit. And we tinted out the windows. We added a big subwoofer to the back. And you could hear me from miles away coming home. My parents sure loved me for that one. So did my neighbors. But I think the key to any young person getting a car is to personalize a little bit. Because you're probably not going to get your dream car. And as you get older, you kind of become a car person or you don't. But you definitely have preferences, right? Some of us like bigger cars. I know I do. I've only had big cars, SUVs. And there are certain non-negotiables. I like 3 rows of seats. Now, ideally, I don't have kids right now, so I take out that 3rd row of seat, and I like a big, I like a lot of trunk room. Some people, don't like SUVs, like smaller cars. I've never been that big since my high school car of tinting the windows. I don't care if you see me or not, but I know some people, like, the first thing they do is tint the windows. It's crazy. The older you get, I had to have the subwoofers. The subwoofer, I couldn't listen to music for 5 minutes with the subwoofer like I did when I was younger. But there is something very, very special about that first car. I don't care how many cars you get since, how much money you make to get sweeter cars. You never quite forget that first ride and some of the memorable moments that you had in it in your high school years. So with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Speaking of rookie quarterbacks, another game I like is the Broncos this week. Not to win the game, but they're getting 6 points. And I think just one of the more fascinating stories, a lot like Caleb and the Bears, is just Sean Payton and this quarterback. Like, how does it look? Does it actually work as seamlessly? Like, the other, one difference between Caleb and Bo Nix is, like, Bo Nix in the preseason succeeded running a lot of the stuff Sean Payton's going to ask him to do. Quick throws, in the pocket, snap, go. Caleb's success came with kind of running around and making plays, which, again, my comp for him has always been like prime Russell Wilson, not true pocket quarterback, like run around, and you can win and make the playoffs with that version. But the guy they won the Super Bowl with was really much more of a game manager who occasionally would do some spectacular shit. But Bo Nix is going to play much more like, historically, I'm not comparing him to Drew Brees here, but ball snapped, balls out pretty quick. And this is a tough test. On the road, spirits are high in Seattle. That place will probably be rocking, I would imagine, raising that 12. I'm just fascinated to watch kind of this team operate. And Sean, who I've watched a decent amount of his press conferences during training camp, pretty upbeat. I think he likes his team. And it's one thing for a coach that's never done anything to like his team. Like, this guy kind of has a decent idea what a good and a bad team looks like. And last year, part of it was he clearly did not like Russell Wilson. I mean, let's look back on that. Remember the discourse and the conversation when he screamed at Russell Wilson? It's like, you can't do that. You can't. He's a coach. That's the player. We've been watching football, depending on how old you are, our entire lives. Isn't that pretty normal? I mean, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning screamed at coaches. Like, this is the big leagues. Russell Wilson's making $40+ million. Sean Payton's making 18, 20. You're allowed to yell at him, especially when you don't think he's any good. Now I think the question mark is the Pittsburgh game. Like, we'll see if he ends up playing in that game because the calf injury is back. Number 3, the much awaited, it's been a long, long time. And I lived in the Bay Area when the 49ers mutually departed with Jim Harbaugh. It's probably one of the bigger stories on a negative side in the history of the Bay Area. I mean, the 49ers got torched for it. And I listen, they regretted it for a while, and Kyle and John kind of saved the day. But then Jim went to Michigan, and in a weird way felt like he was underwhelming because he wasn't like competing to win national championships. He couldn't beat Ohio State. And these last couple of years kind of validated it all. And now he's back. And now he has a quarterback. Now, is his team good enough? I don't know. But I do believe, one, there's just zero chance on God's green earth you could bet against Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert against Antonio Pierce and Gardner Minshew. So he has a clear advantage in this first game, and I expect the Chargers to win. And I'm just glad that we're going to have Jim kind of walking up and down an NFL sideline. Number 4. this has got to be the most anticipated broadcast debut in a long, long time. Uh, Anytime the Cowboys play week one, it's a highly anticipated game. For a lot of the last 20 years, because the Giants had been good, it felt like the Giants and Cowboys played a lot on Sunday Night Football. And now they're playing the Cleveland Browns, who last year made the playoffs, had a fantastic year, have a really good team, even though they're a little banged up. And that game alone, like me and you could be calling it, and people would be interested. I like the Cowboys in that game simply because quarterback advantage, Dallas, and there's some question marks with the Cleveland's offensive line. I would expect Mike Zimmer and that defense to be pretty good. But to me, this game, it feels different because Tom Brady's calling it. And is he going to be good? I sure hope so. Because like most people, you end up watching with the sound on, regardless how many TVs you have, a lot of Sunday afternoon Fox games. And it's going to be, we'll see how he can navigate some of these restrictions. Maybe he won't give a shit. I hope he just is himself. Obviously, he knows football. I think he has this incredible way to balance like being relatable despite being super famous, super rich. He's at least in America, I don't know, worldwide. Like he's like our male Taylor Swift or something in terms of his fame. But can he balance like being pretty entertaining? People can say Gruden's a little shticky, and he can be, but I've watched some of his YouTube videos, him just showing me his office. Gruden can keep my attention. And he kind of has that John Madden magic. He's different than John, but he's just cameras on, lights are on. The dude's a showman. And Tom always was as a player. And him and Peyton obviously have done a lot of ads over the years. So they've played that role in the commercial standpoint. But calling a game, the pressure, I mean, you're going to have 25 million people watching this thing easy. It'll be interesting to see the reaction. Everyone's going to have an opinion. To me, all these guys know football. Like I'm not looking for you to break down the coverage every play. Most people do not care. We want to be entertained. And the two best entertainers by a mile were John Madden, who's the best of all time. And listen, hate him or love him, like Gruden was good at his job. There was a reason they were paying him $10 million a year. And Monday night fell off a cliff when he took the Raiders job because he was entertaining. And this is not about like this job breaking it down to the hardcore that wants to know every route. Like you can't get too into the weeds in football. It's too confusing for like the 29 million people that watched the game last night on Thursday Night Football couldn't tell you 5 routes on the route tree. Couldn't tell you the difference of a 3 technique and a nose tackle. They just can't. And it doesn't matter. That's not what makes football enjoyable. Like Collinsworth just kind of has a good time. He's just an enjoyable hang. I think Troy Aikman has kind of got his swag back. He's just an easy hang. Obviously, you can do some nerdy football stuff, but like part of it is like you're an entertainer. And I think Peyton is really good at this. But like his thing with Eli is a little more looser. And doing a game is a little different. Short sound bites is hard. And I know they've practiced a lot, but they're just going to be a lot of people watching. There are going to be a lot of opinions on his performance. I was kicking myself last night. I thought about trying to get my $5,000 that the Ravens stole from me in that AFC Championship game. And I was going to live bet the Chiefs, and I didn't pull the trigger to get my 5K back. I was like, yeah, it's still kind of risky. We're trying to do a backyard. I got to redo the pool. We got a wedding coming up. But I do want my money back. So I think what I'm going to do is take $1,000 and bet on my favorite money line team or, my favorite underdog and just put the money on them straight up. And there were 3 games that jumped out to me: Dallas on the road in Cleveland, Pittsburgh on the road in Atlanta, and the Jags on the road with the Dolphins. And I kind of ended up like Cleveland can be a tough place to play. And obviously Pittsburgh quarterback situation's up in the air. I'm not a huge Atlanta guy, but and I understand Tomlin's one of the great underdogs in betting history, but that's probably just going to be a stay away for me. So it kind of came down between the Cowboys and the Jags. And I think I've settled on the Jags. And I don't like the Dolphins this year. I don't think they're going to win 2 games, but I think their playoff days are over. And I don't like if you just look at the Jags and you go, well, a huge advantage for Miami early in the season is what? They play outside and it's humid. And most people aren't used to the Florida crazy humidity, especially some of these teams coming from different areas in the country. Well, where do the Jags play? Florida. 2, I understand. Like, I like Peter Schrager. I like Kevin Clark a lot. Those guys love Mike McDaniel. I like Mike McDaniel as an entertainer. I think he says funny shit, and he clearly knows football, right? He's a very, very good offensive mind. Kyle Shanahan loved him for a reason, and he's been good for Tua. But he hasn't really won that many big games. He actually, you could argue, hasn't won any. And so if you look at the 2 coaches, you go, well, Doug Peterson's record, his resume speaks for itself. I mean, you beat Belichick in a playoff game. And I got a lot of question marks with these 2 quarterbacks, but I don't think the gap's that wide. If you tell me Trevor Lawrence just outplays Tua. So what I think I'm going to do, you can get the Jags right now plus 140 as of Friday. I think I'm going to put a little coin on the old Jags to win straight up in that game. And then we'll just kind of let it ride for a couple weeks and see what we can build up to. Last but not least, let's cash this bad boy. The craziest part about week 1 is at the end of the day, it doesn't determine much, right? The Chiefs lost week 1 last year. They won the Super Bowl, won 3 straight games on the road as a dog. So week 1 does not make or break your season. A couple years ago, the 49ers went to the NFC Championship game. They lost on the road to the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields with Trey Lance. By the end of the year, Brock Purdy was starting and helping them make a run. Things changed dramatically in the NFL. That's why all these coaches talk about the 53-man cutdown. Like, I think we get too caught up now in the 53. The season's a game longer. Our practice squad's way bigger. A lot of these practice squad guys will eventually be on the big roster, and half of them be starters by middle to the end of the year. So the team, all this stuff's so fluid because of the injuries. But because of the setup of football, you only play once a week. Like, I always had a hard time when I worked in radio. I was like, it's a big baseball game tonight. But John, this is game 94. It actually doesn't mean anything. So if the ace goes 9 innings, awesome. If he gets shelled and they yank him after 3, it doesn't determine much. And that's part of the reason baseball has fallen out of the landscape of all of us talking about it, because it's a bad talk radio sport. It's a bad podcast sport. Football is made for this because every game means so much. And when you have an entire offseason and everyone has hope, there are going to be some teams that just look atrocious. And whether everyone thought you were going to be bad, or whether you're a team like the Bears and you lose to the Titans, or whoever, the Giants were to lose to Minnesota at home, people just freak out. And there's going to be a team or two. Like, it's one thing to lose. The Ravens lost. That's a loss. You can keep your head up. You lost by a touchdown. You didn't cover, but whatever. I mean, you were right there at the end. And it's against the Chiefs. But there are going to be some losses by double digits where it's like, you guys looked like shit. And I think the problem with that is, and this is where the fans and whoever's covering your team, and it's like, you've had 9 months to get ready for this game, and you lay an egg. I love overreactions or proper reactions when a team just gets housed and worked in week 1. It's one thing. Listen, you're going to get beat. You're going to have lay eggs throughout the season. When that happens on week 1, fair or not, people react to it like your season's over before it even began.